Namaste. This is Ruchi Srimali from Sangam Talks, welcoming you to this series of Luminaries of Bengal series. And this is our episode 2. Today's topic is Brahma Samaj, its genesis and impact on the development of modern India. Before we start this series, I would like to share a small video about Bangla Abar, who is with us in this series. So let me just play this video.
I am a founder and the international convener for the Bangla Abar, a platform to promote awareness about Bengal's heritage, history, and culture. I'm so thankful to Sangam Talks for organizing this series of discussions and talks with scholars and experts from around the world on the luminaries of Bengal who has significantly contributed in the development of modern India. So I'm looking forward to this series and I hope same with you. Thank you for joining and namaskar.
Okay, he was Kanchan Banerjee, the founder of Bangla Abar. And now let's move to our talk today. Today's speaker of this episode is Sri Joydeep Maharaj. He is born in Lübeck, Germany in 1962. He grew up in Kolkata with a passion for literature and theatre. He wrote and directed many significant plays, and his writings got published in numerous Bengali and English magazines. But his deep quest for a spiritual identity drew him away from the mainstream. He traveled through the Himalayas, wandered around the banks of Narmada, met numerous monks, and then he met Swami Paramananda, who later became his guru. He was reborn into a wholly new perspective and he gave up his job and joined Paramananda mission. He wrote extensively in Charai Bati magazine, both in Bengali and English. He translated Swami Paramananda's work in English and also wrote a drama called Shishuraj. Then he wrote a book named Kal Drishta. His words and teachings inspired the young generation a lot. Later, in 2011, he established a spiritual retreat, Maramia, in Azimganj, Murshidabad, where he presently works and lives. He inspires and guides people to a spiritual vision and freedom. Many people from Europe and various parts of our country come to Maramia to experience the art of life and living. In today's talk, we have a moderator who is going to handle this talk, and he is Jay Bhattacharjee. He is born in a family of freedom fighters and nationalists. He studied in Mumbai, Delhi, and Calcutta, and did his postgraduate from Cambridge University. He also studied corporate laws and finance, writes in a national print media, and he authored 2 books. The second book, Resurgent Bharat and Other Issues, was published last year. Now, I would like to welcome both our speaker and moderator to today's session. And I now hand it over to Maharajji. Namaste, Maharajji.
Namaste, Ruchi.
So it's
Namaste,
on you
Joydeep.
now.
Nice to meet you, and thanks for the very exhaustive introduction. So, Joyda, will you please take over since you are the moderator? I think you have to unmute yourself.
Joyda, you are on a mute mode.
I'm unmuting. I must not take up too much time. A good moderator is moderate in his presence. I think that's something which we were taught for years. So we will let the person who has studied the subject, all of us have studied it in some ways or the other, but Joydeep, if he permits me to call him by this name, he might be, I might have a few years advantage. What we will do is, Joydeep, if you can do it 20 minutes, then we have and the others can join the discussion depending upon the mode which our the gracious lady is doing all the controls. After about 20 minutes, may I suggest, Joydeep, some ideas which we can discuss another for 5-7 minutes and then continue and have a total session of, you have three sessions. I won't take up too much of my interaction. So altogether, we'll proceed in that manner. And the final thing, summary, or don't like the word summary too much. The consensus of the people here, I'll take the liberty of presenting to you, Joydeep. So may we start off with your enormous learning?
Thank you, Jaida. Now, I imagine that this is a topic revolving around the Brahmo Samaj, and I think a large section of the audience, I assume, do not really know much about this movement. Nowadays, new generation Bengalis also, they talk a lot about Ram Mohan Rai, about Devendranath Thakur, but people are not really aware of the intricacies and the evolution and of the Samaj and the times and the perspectives. So I think what we will do is first lay out for the audience, especially for a non-Bengali audience, a kind of a brief history of Brahmo Samaj. We touch upon some of its very salient features to give the audience a perspective of why this Samaj and this movement played a very key role in the 19th century Bengal and India, and it's still a kind of a silently, subtly, a force to reckon with in our national narrative. So, Ruchi ji, we can start with the slides. Yes, first we have the topic. It's a very exhaustive topic, and because of time constraints, we have to be very careful about this. The Brahmo Samaj is genesis and impact on the development of modern India, and then spiritual, social, cultural, and political. So we will, as Joyda had suggested, we would try to break it up into three segments. First, we will go to the genesis or the origins or the beginnings. Why was it necessary to form such a kind of Samaj? And then we will walk through a bit, just touch on some of the aspects, because we don't have the time to go into the depths and the nuances of the movement too much. So we'll just go through the evolution of the Samaj and the way it progressed, and then how it moved on, how some of the personalities involved in the movement, and that will be the second section. And in the final section, we'll talk about the overall impact and how the Samaj actually sort of dissolved into a kind of a mainstream, and the overall impact of the Brahma Samaj on our national development, or you can say our national and cultural consciousness that started building up. And we can then sort of summarize or sort of conclude with that. So that is my idea. So that's the topic. And first, and we go to the next slide then, Ruchiji. Yes, you can see this is the logo or the symbol of the early Brahma Samaj movement. The symbol, like the Samaj, had changed a lot over the years. It had also evolved. The images had changed, but this uh, original image and variations of it remained for a longish period of time. Below, you see this kind of a cross wood structure, which was used by acharyas and teachers and priests to keep the scriptures, these books and manuscripts, on this wooden structure, and read from them, and then explain the mantras or the slokas. So that is why this is sacred. The sacred scriptures being contained by these sacred structures, Above it, you see the crescent moon. The crescent moon is a very familiar symbol with Shiva and the moon beside his matted hair. And it is also an important symbol for the Muslims, the moon, the crescent moon. And then over it, you have this lotus, which is an enduring and a long lasting and ancient symbol of our philosophy, of our spiritual ideals. The lotus, which blooms early in the morning at dawn, when the first ray of the sun hits the flower, it blossoms. So it's a it's a imagery of our potential. When it is hit, or when it is touched by the spark of gyan or wisdom, then all our potentials blossom. So that is the symbol of the lotus. Over that, you have the Onkar. Onkar, as you know, the eternal tune, the eternal resonance, whatever. It's a huge concept, and it is somehow it is also a symbolic representation of Brahma Tattva, of pure consciousness. And but what was contentious, of course, as you can see, is the cross, the sign of the cross behind the Onkar. So that created a lot of confusion. That in fact created a kind of fear and insecurity among some of the conservative Orthodox Hindus about whether Brahmo Samaj was actually Christianizing itself. So the way we start with the symbol, and now we can move on to the next slide. Next slide is a quotation from Rabindranath Tagore. As in this series of Luminaries of Bengal, the first episode was about Ram Mohan Rai. And you cannot talk about Brahmo Samaj without exploring in depth Ram Mohan Rai's contributions to our society. In a many ways, he was a multifaceted personality. He was a layered personality. And I think that is how it should be. I mean, we should not be saying the same thing throughout our life. We change, we evolve, we respond to circumstances. So Ram Mohan Rai cannot be straitjacketed in any particular ism or in any particular belief systems. So Ram Mohan Rai was either loved, worshipped even during his time, or hated and denied by many people. So this quotation of Rabindranath Tagore, I think, is very significant for us. It says Rabindranath Tagore had responded to the controversy around Ram Mohan Rai with the words, the quotation was actually in Bengali, I made a rough translation. When great Mahatmas come, incidentally, uh, Rabindranath Tagore used to call Ram Mohan Rai Mahapurush or Mahatma on a number of occasions. And he really had a great admiration for Ram Mohan Rai, probably because of the influence of his father, Devendranath Rai, and also Dwarakanath Thakur himself was a close friend of Ram Mohan Rai. For various reasons, he called him Mahapurusha several times, which is quite unique because Rabindranath Tagore was not prone to use such terms for people. So he says, when great Mahatmas come, either we have to acknowledge their greatness 100% and worship them, or we totally deny their contribution and insult them. There is no middle ground. Exactly. And that I think is very relevant even in today's context. We are so polarized about everything, whether we talk about personalities, whether we talk about leaders, whether we talk about particular religions. We are so polarized about with our opinions. There's absolutely no middle ground. And when we are polarized, we inevitably tend to be judgmental. We cannot evaluate. That is the problem, I think. So, in today's discussion, we will try our best to avoid these two extremes of adulation and on one level and complete denial and criticism at another level. We'll try to find a middle ground so we can get a glimpse at least of the truth. When it comes to Brahmo Samaj, the same is true. Whatever, when you say about Ram Mohan Rai or Brahmo Samaj, even when we talk about Mohandas Gandhi, even forgive me for saying this. Take the example of our present prime minister. There is either somebody loves him like a god, or somebody hates him like a devil incarnate. There is absolutely no middle ground. So you cannot really evaluate. You cannot really analyze. That is a problem that we all face. So I think this quotation of Rabindranath Thakur is very pertinent in our discussion as we begin the discussion on the genesis of Brahmo Samaj. So, Ruchi ji, please you go to the next slide, where we have this image of Ram Mohan Rai. I hope, Ruchi ji, you are listening, and can you go to the next slide? Okay. So, in the next slide, we have a figure of Ram Mohan Rai, and we are trying to see the perspective. First of all, the political perspective. This is the early 19th century. Please do remember this time, early 19th century. The Mughal Empire was completely on the decline. It had lost its hold. And at the same time, the British had not really been able to entrench their feet firmly on the ground. So this was a problem. This was a process. This was a time of great chaos, great mayhem, lawlessness, no rule of law at all. The zamindars were oppressing the poorer sections. The rich was becoming richer. The poor was becoming poorer. And the price that we paid was morality. That was one big problem, was the political instability, the political rulelessness that was prevalent almost throughout the country. Yes, now we have come to the slide. So that led to a kind of decadence. And some historians have pointed out that in some parts of Bengal, for example, for let's say in Charak Puja, or let's say during the Mahesh holy bath, or during the Rath Yatra, or during the Kirtans, or during the Durga Puja festivals, it was total orgy. People were using foul language. People were prone to rampant alcoholism, and young men were gambling, were betting their own wives in these gambles. So it was a lot of obscenity language, and this happens even now in the villages nowadays. During the Durga Puja immersion time, it's just a showcase, a showroom of obscenity. It's like live TikTok videos going on all the time. You see men and women together. So all this was happening, not everywhere, but in some places. And people of the urban areas who were trying to be educated, who were trying to follow a more moral path, most of them felt that it is because of this idolatry, that is because of idol worship, this problem was taking place. The social evils were directly attributed to idol worship. So that was the one of the essential things that has to be understood. Third point was that the missionaries were taking advantage of this situation. They were constantly insulting our gods and goddesses, publishing pamphlets and leaflets and distributing them to the masses, and in their own languages sometimes. And always they had their allurements. They were giving out temptations and benefits so that they can convert to Christianity. So Ram Mohan Rai, he came to Calcutta at that time, and he started writing against these missionaries. It's very important. These missionaries who were trying to convert by insulting our Hindu traditions. So this is, I think, a very important point that has to be understood. By that time, Ram Mohan Rai had already become quite well known because of his steps against the Sati Pratha, the Sati traditions, and also because he had written this famous document in Farsi where he tried to establish monotheism above everything else. So he took this along in his attempts to reform. He tried to reform Hinduism and refine it to monotheism, which we call in Bengali or in Sanskrit Ekeshwarbad. So, because he felt that in the Vedas and Upanishads, which are sort of the embryo of the womb of our dharma, of our philosophy, there is this concept of non duality. There's this concept of Brahma. And that Brahma is shapeless, Nirakar. That Brahma is attributeless, Nirgun. But he did not much like this Nirgun idea of Brahma. He preferred the Nirakar or the shapeless of the Muslims, the Allah. And he also liked the one God, one and only true God of the Christian theology, because their God had some kindness and forgiveness and love and protest against idol worship and all these things. So he felt, I mean, it was, I think for him, it was not really a theological question. It was more a social question. He felt that if you have a Sagun godhead or a Sagun figure, one who is looking over, one who is kind, one who is who sort of insists on some kind of morality, on some kind of idealism, then that will be a kind of a moral guardian to the society as a whole. Because as you know, Hindu Dharma was not really organized. The first person to have organized any religion was Gautam Buddha. And it is the Christians who sort of copied him. Before that, Adi Shankaracharya did. So, at the time of Ram Mohan, Hindu Dharma was not streamlined. There was no organization. So, neither was there a political authority on our conduct, nor was there a streamlined religious authority on our conduct. So, that I think is a very important factor that he considered, and he thought that this would be the base from which he would build up his first sabha, which he called the Atmiya Sabha. He started the Atmiya Sabha in 1815. This Atmiya Sabha is a very important concept because you see, Atmiya in Bengali is a very colloquial word, it's a common word, means relative. But if you look deeply, Atmiya comes from the word Atma, and Atma is almost synonymous to Brahma. Atma is like the self, the one self, the pure self. So Atmiya, when he made this Atmiya Sabha, he actually invited people who believed in this pure self, and who was all these people who sort of, whatever their faith is, whatever their inclinations are, if you believe that we are from that one self, you are welcome. So that was the idea. And another thing that is important about Raja Ram Mohan Rai was, he was, of course, quite influenced by the Western Enlightenment, you can say, the liberal, progressive ideas of the West, where they give a lot of preference to reasoning, to logic, to scientific inquiry, to social justice, and to women's rights, to women's emancipation. He had just been working a lot on this sati pratha, and he was also appalled by these child marriages, girl childs who were married off at a very early age, and the plight of the widows. So he took this opportunity to build up this Atmiya Sabha, to start a kind of a reform movement through a refined religion. That was Raja Ram Mohan Rai's ideas. So, and later, from 1815 onwards, later it sort of, people thought that it was becoming a little too Christianized. So he was fitted away a bit. Then 1828, Ram Mohan Rai, he established the Brahma Samaj. Before it was Atmiya Sabha, now it became Brahmo Samaj, with some of his friends, followers, and especially this time, among his friends, he had Dwarkanath Thakur. Now, I would like to insist that I will continue to use this word Thakur and not Tagore, just because I'm talking in English, because Thakur is the name. And it's a bit shameful that we Indians and Bengalis continue to use the distorted pronunciation that the Europeans had started, because they could not pronounce. We are sort of using the same corrupted and distorted pronunciation. So, Tarakarnath Thakur, grandfather of Rabindranath Thakur, and the participation of the Thakurbari, you can say, it played a very key role in the development of the Brahmo Samaj. So, 1828, the Brahmo Samaj was formed, and then 1833, actually in 1830, Ram Mohan Rai left for England, and from that time there was a kind of a sort of a decline, because without the leader, you see, without the man, without the charisma, things sort of get a bit monotonous. So after 1830, there was a kind of a decline. The membership dwindled a bit. 1833, Ram Mohan Rai passed away, and then slowly, you can say, Devendranath Thakur started taking over, and it was a big change in the Brahmo Samaj. So that is the role of Ram Mohan Rai. In this instance, I would also like to mention that the immediate, uh, let's say, excuse for Ram Mohan's protest against these missionaries was a man called William Ward of the Sri Rampur mission, who was a man who was really attacking the Hindu devs and devis and Hindu customs and rituals, Hindu worships, Hindu dharma, relentlessly and ruthlessly, something that Christian missionaries do even today, both in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, or among the tribes in the Northeast. The thing that they do is to constantly attack our gods and goddesses. You are attacking their characters, attacking their roles, attacking their amorous behaviors, and all these things. And the problem is that we can't push back, because we don't understand the significance of these symbols and idols or whatever. Anyway, so that was the role of Ram Mohan Rai for the genesis, for the beginning. Main thing is, I think that is something that is very important to remember, that the social uh, evils, he was more concerned with the social ills, and he tried to approach it through his religious reforms. So that was Ram Mohan Rai's ideas. Now, now please go into the next slide, Ruchiji. So, I just to sort of summarize what Ram Mohan Rai's effects have been. Monotheism, as I've already said, that monotheism, the Ekeshwarvad, where this Sagun Brahma, it is very important that he tried to refine Hinduism from all these idols and customs and gods and goddesses, and tried to bring in this concept of one God, just like Allah, just like God, just like the Christian God. That was one thing. Formless. When you have this formless authority, then you don't fight with the forms, then you don't fight with characters, then you don't fight with attributes. So you can't form communities with formless. Then reasoning and inquiry. He was so insistent on this, that in the Brahma Samaj there was a general kind of a policy that scriptures are authentic, of course, but if there comes a time when there's a conflict between your sense of reasoning and the scriptures, then reasoning should be given precedence. Your sense of reason, your experience, your inquiry, your search for the truth, and what the answers that you are getting through your common sense, through your learning, through your knowledge, that should be given precedence over what the scriptures dictate. Then individual freedom, more than what the community has to say. That this individuality or individualism was something that picked up from the West. The idea of social justice, along with it, the political systems, democracy, the common person having his say, and of course, women's emancipation. So these were the fundamental things that Raja Ram Mohan Rai tried to work on. So that is my genesis, Joyda. Now you can sort of hold the thread for me.
Joydeep, may I say without any hesitation whatsoever that this is one of the most incisive, perceptive, analytical assessments of Raja Ram Mohan and the Brahmo Samaj I have heard in recent times. I've had the pleasure of listening to people like Professor Chandavarkar and Dr. Bhandarkar when I was young and we stayed in Bombay and Pune. I've also heard my own relatives and others who are very distinguished people, but you are somewhere near the top, my young friend. And I say this without any embarrassment. I am moved, I'm touched, because what this country needs today is a reassessment of the great Raja for the general public. See, I hope these, thanks to Kanchon all the way in Boston, I hope these, what we are trying to do, these will be these technologically advanced methods or computerized knowledge bases which you have prepared with so much effort. I hope these will be disseminated among the people of India, because this country today is on the cusp of a change. We've had 1,000 years of slavery in various forms. We have had hundreds of years of anarchy where Bharat per se was never in the picture by and large. So, what you have done, Joydeep, is brought up the ideas of Raja Ram Mohan Roy in simple language. You have the benefit. Only a great mind can express complex ideas in simple terms. So you know what I'm saying about you. I have no hesitation. You see, what the Raja did, he made it clear that Hinduism has to go back to its Vedantic roots, to the Upanishads. And then all the civic or civil offenses and behavioral and man-made rules and regulations would disappear. It would require effort. It would require a concerted effort, which unfortunately, I think, Joydeep, you and I can agree on, that has been the greatest lacuna of the Brahmo movement. We have not been able to mobilize the masses. Our ideas have been esoteric. There's nothing wrong with esoteric ideas. That is how Newton saw the apple fall. But then the theory of gravity has had to be popularized. The same way, a return to pristine Hinduism, Vedantic Hinduism, Upanishadic Hinduism, this has to be brought to the general public. However long it takes, we have lost too much time. We cannot afford this delay. So I think what we have done, Joydeep, is of immense importance. And I think we need to carry on to the other segment, and then I'll suggest some ideas for you further. Back to you.
Thank you, Jayada, for the wonderful response to the brief discussion that we had. And you have said very nicely that we are on the cusp of change, and we are indeed. This is a threshold time of our civilization, both for Bharatiya civilization and the global civilization, where I believe that Bharat is going to play a very key role in that. And you have also mentioned that Hinduism has to go back to its Vedic roots more. Not only that, more of that we need. And I will come back to some of your points when we talk about the impact, because mostly where you were, in fact, in the last stage of your little talk, you were talking about the impact of the Brahmo Samaj. Yes, we'll come to that, and we'll deal with it a little more in detail when we come to the impact stage of Brahmo Samaj. Now we can move on, Ruchiji, to the next slide, where we go to the next great towering personality of Brahmo Samaj, Sri Devendranath Thakur. We here talk about evolution, Yes, Devendranath Thakur was an exceptional man, another very interesting personality, a sage-like person, a yogi, a domestic person, a yogi. He was in charge of a big estate. His father, Darokanath Thakur, who we know have already been introduced, he had left a huge debt on the family. So Devendranath Thakur had to work hard to clear those debts. But at the same time, he was a man who was deeply meditative and also devotional in nature. So he took responsibility after Raja Ram Mohan's death in Bristol in 1993. And he was not only involved with Brahmo Samaj, he participated actively in all the progressive movements and activities that were taking place in Bengal at that time. And during his tenure as the main Acharya of Brahma Samaj, he had to face some contradictions because he faced a group of young, very charming people, among them Keshab Chandra Sen, and they were almost advocating for a separate dharma, for a separate Brahmo dharma. So he did not want that to happen at all. He was always loyal to the great Hindu umbrella. Though he wanted some reforms, though he was courageous enough to carry out some of the changes that were needed to do to move away from the Hindu conservative ideas, but he was not like these radical young generation who were in their own emotions, who wanted a completely different kind of a dharma now, uh, outside the Hindu dharma fold. So we can say, if when we go through some of the insights of the historians, that Ram Mohan Rai tried to spearhead Upanishad-based pure Vedanta in the society. But later, uh, Akshay Kumar Datto, Devendranath Thakur, and the early part of Keshab Chandra Sen, they tried to uh, concentrate more on rationality, liberation, devotion. And this duality, this is very also very important. Rational jukti, mukti, bhukti, they used to say in Bengali. Rationality, liberation, and devotion. So duality is also very important. I mean, Devendranath Thakur insisted that with the divinity, he liked to enjoy a kind of a father-son relationship. Instead of, we are all one, we all finally merge into that one blissful superconscious. This somehow he did not feel comfortable with, because he was a devotee at heart. His nature, he was a devotee, but in the bhav language, we say the shanto bhav, the bhav of the rishis, not the expressive emotional way, not like a friend or a lover or a normal devotee like a Hanuman, but a devotee in a very silent manner, in a silent, meditative, and a contemplative way. So he was less inclined to very active social reforms. He was more inclined to do sadhana and attain a kind of a spiritual upliftment for all the people who were part of the Brahma movement. He was more into prayers, more into sadhana, meditation, contemplation, reading and translating and writing from on the scriptures. He was more into that. And at that time, there was also this movement of the young Bengal, which was spearheaded by Henry Louis Vivian de Rosio. De Rosio, as some of you probably know, was a very capable personality, was very much fond of social reforms, but he was a man, the young people who followed him, they sort of derided the Hindu culture, they derided our history, they derided our ancient wisdom, and they made fun of them, and they were actually leaning towards atheism. And one part of the Samaj, the Brahmo Samaj, was also sort of getting a bit attracted to that ideology. So towards the later part of Devendranath's tenure, he was having some problems with Keshab Chandra Sen, and his followers. Though Keshab Chandra Sen, again, he changed a lot. He was another very emotional person. So, as I said, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, let me again come back to it. Raja Ram Mohan Rai wanted to spearhead an Upanishad based pure Vedanta, later followed by Akshay Kumar, Devendranath, Keshab Chandra, who showed the path of rationality, liberation, devotion, and duality. Then Rajnarayan Boshu. I will spend some time on Rajnarayan Boshu, another very remarkable and a great stalwart, and very, very, very contemporary person in the sense we need to talk more about him, even outside the Brahma Samaj discussion. So Rajnarayan Boshu and Thakurbari followed the ideals of Ram Mohan initially, more rigidly, and then Keshab Chandra Sen, a new persona of Keshab Chandra Sen, a bit of transformed Keshab Chandra Sen. By that time, he was very popular, and he was a great speaker, and he had almost become an avatar among his friends. Keshab Chandra Sen, Bijoykrishna Goswami, and Shivnath Shastri tried to do something like a democratic devotion. You see, that is another very interesting concept: democratic devotion. And then Sri Ramkrishna came into the picture. So this can be a kind of a brief idea of the way the formation was moving ahead. Now we go into the next slide, Ruchiji. It is uh, it is called cultural revival. This, I think, is a very important thing and less stressed upon. This language and culture was very important within the fold of the Brahma Samaj. You see, first, what they did was when they met, assembled together, they read from the scriptures, then they translated them into native language, in this case, Bengali, and they discussed this. They made interpretations of these translations. So, this inspired songs. Ram Mohan Rai himself wrote almost 150 Brahma Sangeet songs, songs in praise of Brahma, and later followed by others in the 1860s and later than that, even 70s. Rabindranath Tagore himself used to write regularly for the Brahma Samaj, and they were known as Brahma Sangeets. In fact, till even the first quarter of the 20th century, Rabindra Sangeet or songs of Rabindranath were sung mostly by Brahmos, and Hindus usually avoided singing Rabindranath songs because they thought that it is Brahmo Sangeet. So this paved the way for lot of creativity. Many, many leaf periodicals, many magazines, both in Bengali and in English. Many essays, commentaries, translations started coming out from the Brahma Samaj. And as I've mentioned, this created literally a wave. So when we talk about the Bengali Renaissance, especially in the field of literature or in the field of culture, Brahmo Samaj played a very big role inadvertently. I'm not saying that they did it intentionally. And also because Thakurbari, not only Rabindranath Tagore himself or his father, but also others, brothers, Jyotirindra Thakur also, they all became part of the Brahmo Samaj. So not only that, they also, the contribution of Thakurbari is also very important. That, for example, I'll just give you an example. Jyotirindranath Thakur, the Chorda of Rabindranath Tagore, took his wife Kadambari Devi on a horse and rode her in Eden Gardens. It was unthinkable in those days. You see, absolutely unthinkable that a wife of such an important family was riding a horse along with her husband in broad daylight for everyone to see in Eden Gardens. So this was a kind of a revolution. These progressive ideas were a kind of a revolution to people. The dress codes, for example, the way the women wear saris, even today, this was something that was a trendsetter. The Thakurbari was the main trendsetter of this. Before that, women used to wear these saris in a normal way, at home, without any undergarments. It was Thakurbari who started this tradition of using blouses. So even fashion, dress, and the freedom for women to go out attend the Shabhas, participate, take leadership of certain initiatives, all these things contributed to the cultural upheaval of Bengal at that time. I think that should be remembered. That is very important for us to remember these contributions. So now we come to the next slide, Ruchiji. Uh, yes, this is Rajnarayan Boshu. As I said, that Rajnarayan Boshu's contribution is very important. I read out at the beginning Jodunath Sarkar's comments on Rajnarayan Boshu, a great historian. He said, in Rajnarayan's work on nationalism, there appeared one central belief that before a nation could participate in universal progress, it had to become a nation. And before it became a nation, its people had to acquire self respect for the language, the history, and the true foundation upon which their society and culture were founded. He was both a nationalist and a social reformer. This is very important to understand. Rajnarayan Boshu, let me just tell you, was the maternal grandfather of Aurobindo Ghosh. He was a exceptional, great personality, another sage-like person. In fact, he was called Rishi by many Bengalis at that time. Many people used to visit him regularly. For example, Aurobindo Ghosh himself, Rabindranath Thakur, Narendranath Dutta, later who became Swami Vivekananda, Bhudev Mukhopadhyay, Bijoykrishna Goswami, all these stalwarts during their young days used to go to him, sit at his feet, and listen to him because of his ideas, because of his thoughts, because of his great sage like presence. He was part of the Young Bengal movement during his initial days, but later he completely changed to Brahmo Samaj. And his role in the Brahmo Samaj, I think, is underplayed a bit. For all the historians, I've read many books, I see that Rajnarayan Boshu's name is not mentioned a lot, but which is very important. It is his contribution, I think, is very important because he stressed on this nationality. For example, let us look at this first point: national identity to nationalism. For example, we always tend to nowadays our modern day Indologists blame Ram Mohan Rai for two reasons. First thing about sati, because according to them there was no sati at all going on in India at that time. Number two is this English Education Act. Well, there are pros and cons to these arguments. That is another argument. Don't want to go into it. But if you look at it a bit deeply, if you look at the national movement or the national consciousness, the great leaders who were part of this national building up of the national consciousness, most of them, more than 90% of them, were English educated. Right from the political leaders to the cultural leaders to the social reformers to the freedom fighters, everybody. Your Mohandas Gandhi himself, Jawaharlal Nehru, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Dr. Ambedkar, Subhash Chandra Bosu, Aurobindo Ghosh, and many, many others. All the reformers that we talk about, all the great luminaries were English educated. And does that mean that I mean only because they were English educated, they understood nationalism? No, they could counter the Western civilization. That is the main thing that happened. Maybe that was not the intention of Raja Ram Mohan Rai. That is not my point. My point is that in order to establish your own identity, you have to understand the enemy. You have to understand their motives. You have to understand their history. You have to understand their colonial mindset. And in order to understand them, you have to learn. The problem is that our society, maybe part of our society was very learned in Sanskrit and all other languages. Maybe we had some of the great Brahmin scholars, but they were very closed within their learning, within their own culture, within their own dharma, within their own philosophy. And they thought that they had nothing to learn from the others who were coming in, invading and plundering us. So I think that is very important. You see, when you talk about nationality, we are talking about Rashtra. Country and nationality are two different things altogether. You see, we were a desh all the time. We were a country all the time. Bharat, Bharat, Bharsha, Mahabharat. We know we are a country. But what about the political identity? The nation state concept is a very fairly new concept, not more than 200 years old. And that has been built up by the Europeans. That nation is built upon one race, one religion, and one language. That is the idea of a nation state. You see? And they use this idea to say that India is not a nation because we are many races, we are many languages, we are many religions. You see? So, first of all, we have to understand, they had to understand, these reformers, these nationalists who were trying to redeem India's place under the sun, they had to understand the motives. You have to use their own game because they are the rulers now. So you have to play their game with their own rules and beat them in that rule. So that I think played a great role, and this is I think what Rajnarayan Boshu was trying to say when Jodhanath Sarkar said that people had to become a nation. So in order to become a nation, you need reforms. When there is so much chaos, when there's so much confusion in the society, and there are so many gods and goddesses, and there are so many rituals, then what is the identity of a nation? What makes us feel that we are a one nation? We have to do something about that, you see? So that was Rajnarayan Boshu's ideas. So, and in the second point, I've written evolving concept of a nation state, countering the Europeans in their own game. So we have to understand the role of the Western civilization and how it is different from our civilization, and then to counter them, then to see the superiority of our civilization over others. So first, learn their language and learn to talk in their language. They are always caught talking about human rights, human freedom, and all that. Okay, we have our own human rights, so our whole human freedom from our own philosophy. First, implement that. First, make a demonstration of that. So that is what Rajnarayan Boshu tried to say. Come to the next slide, Ruchi. And he has, now I'll directly take from two quotes from Rajnarayan Boshu. Very nice, very touching. He had said, I am a Hindu like yourself. I pride myself in the name. I do not consider Brahmoism to be different from Hinduism. I am fired with indignation when I see religionists classified in this way: Christians, Mohammedans, Brahmos, Hindus, as if Brahmoism is different from Hinduism. Brahmoism is Hinduism, and Brahmos are emphatically Hindus. I think he's the only other first person who really directly said these things. First great Brahmo leader who directly said this in no uncertain terms. And that I think is very important to understand the Indian nationalism, which was now becoming during the late 1860s and early 1870s, a kind of a Hindu revivalism, a kind of a Hindu nationalism. And that's why the Muslims started moving away from Brahmo Samaj. Very important. And it's also during this time. Why did he have to say this? Because it was during this time, in 1872, the Brahmo Marriage Act was passed. You see? And in that marriage act, the man and the woman had to profess that I'm not a Hindu, not a Muslim, not a Christian, and then you are a Brahmo, and then you can marry. So there was a lot of resentment, obviously, among the Hindu Brahmins and Hindu intellectuals about this kind of marriage, where Brahmoism was consciously trying to move away from Hinduism under the leadership of Keshab Chandra Sen. Now, Rajnarayan Boshu, who was also close to Keshab Chandra Sen, had vehemently said this in this context, under the context of this marriage act. And later in 1872, in the same year that the same year that the Brahmo Marriage Act was passed, he said in 1872, I may say that I see in my mind the noble and puissant Hindu nation rousing herself after sleep and rushing headlong towards progress, with divine prowess. I see this rejuvenated nation again, illumining the world by her knowledge, spirituality, and culture, and the glory of Hindu nation again spreading over the whole world. Source R.C. Mujumdar. So again, we see a difference. Ram Mohan Rai, Raja Ram Mohan Rai was at that time, in the beginning of the 19th century, defensive about Hinduism. He had to be. He was trying to prove that Hinduism is not inferior to Christianity or any other religion. And here, Rajnarayan Boshu is saying, this is a Bengali speech, and the name of the speech is Hindu Dharme Sreshtota. He was saying that Hinduism is the most superior religion of the world, and when it wakes up in its refined glory, it will have a lot of things to give back to the world. We see a resonance of what Vivekananda will say after a few years, both in the West and in India. You see? So that I think is very important. It is also important to note that Dayananda Saraswati had come, when he came to Kolkata, had visited Rajnarayan Singh, and Rajnarayan Singh had given him a translation of this particular speech, and he was moved by it. He was totally moved by Dayananda Saraswati, and you know Dayananda Saraswati's contribution in this Hindu revival. So we take a break again. Joyda, you can come back to you to take the thread from here. Please unmute yourself.
Joydeep, my felicitations on another scintillating segment which should put at rest much of the debate in the entire Indian country, our nation, about Brahmoism. Now, even the Arya Samaj, which is supposedly a brother movement or a sister movement or a fraternal movement, even in the Arya Samaj, there is an enormous amount of ignorance about the Brahmo Samaj. In Delhi, we have the very well-known building called the Raja Ram Mohan Roy Memorial Trust. It's in the heart of the capital. It's at the heart of the Lachan zone. It's in a place called Rouse Avenue Lane. It's an enormous building which was inaugurated by the late Chief Justice of India, Mr. S.R. Das. My parents played some contribution in it in terms of raising funds. A lot of the Brahmos from the Lahore Brahmo Samaj were very important in setting up this Raja Ram Mohan Roy Memorial Trust. And to our great dismay, even now, we find that the message of the Brahmo Samaj is totally not understood even among the Arya Samaj people. Is it a fault of the Brahmo movement? Have we failed somewhere to disseminate the thoughts of Rajnarayan Bose, of Dwarkanath, Rabindranath? At one time, it was very interesting. People who know Indian films, popular films, Utpal Dutt, as is known in the rest of the country, became a popular film actor. But once he was interviewed on Doordarshan in the old days, and a very enthusiastic young lady asked Utpal Dutt, Mr. Dutt, what do you think of the Indian Renaissance? Utpal Dutt, a CPM, ML, whatever you call him, you know what he said? There is no such thing, madam, as the Indian Renaissance. It was the Bengal Renaissance. I mean, I'm just giving you what you have set out so nicely. Where we have failed, even in Maharashtra, where the Prarthana Samaj, which is not like the Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj is definitely part of the Brahmo Samaj. The Prarthana Samaj has also failed to disseminate the ideals of Raja Ram Mohan Roy and the great savants of the Brahmo Samaj. There were some Maharashtrians, the Principal Wellinkar, the great Brahmo, Principal Bhandarkar, the Bhandarkar Institute in Pune. Then in the south, if you go, There was the famous Dr. Subbarayan, who was the governor of Tamil Nadu and later Bombay, who was the father of Mohan Kumaramangalam. And many of us have known Mohan Kumaramangala's son, who was a well-known TV star. But anyway, Mohan Kumaramangalam, who died in that air crash. So in the south, this was a small but very powerful Brahmo Samaj. But the movement never spread. We could not take with us the Arya Samajis. We certainly could not take with us the vast majority of the Hindu population of our country. Somewhere where Joydeep, the leadership of the Brahmo Samaj has not come up to the mark. If I say that, it's not to disparage the legacy of the great Brahmos. It's that we, current generation, we have failed. Now, part of the downfall is, of course, I regret to say, we are Nobobidhan, our family, but my Dadu was very clear. Keshab Chandra's one or two decisions were disastrous. Child marriage to the royal family, which under no circumstances should have been done, and few others. So, but the Brahmo Samaj recovered from these blows, yet on the national scene, we are very esoteric, some we are regarded as, अरे है ये ब्रह्मो समाज, ये लोग बोलते हैं, गाना वाना गाते हैं. You know, the Brahmo wedding is still not recognized in India. Are you aware of that? A Brahmo wedding has to be followed by a wedding under the Special Marriage Act, 1950. Because why? Some lawyers and these things, they said, no, it does not have the fire, it does not have the saptapadi. Therefore, you Brahmos, you have your wedding, you sing a lot of Brahmo Shongit, Tego songs, but your marriage will not be recognized under Indian law. So these are the fault lines in the Indian state, in the Indian Republic. And I am so happy you brought them up, but now we should concentrate on that. How do we make the great Raja Ram Mohan Roy, even Keshab Chandra Sen, he came back to the fold. I must say, he came back to the fold. And the innumerable number of Brahmo savants. It's a French word which is not very easy to translate into English. It is used in English, but savant, the word has a much more melodious, but a much wider context. Savant is a thinker, he's a scholar, he's an activist, he's a committed publicist. So this, we have failed to take the rest of the country along with us. So back to you, Joydeep.
Thank you, Joyda, again for that wonderful, overall perspective. And you sort of mentioned that it has not really spread, and somehow we also have a responsibility for this. Okay, I think I will, towards the end of this discussion, I'll try to address this issue a little in a different light, in a different way. Maybe you will not agree with me, but that doesn't matter. Disagreement is welcome. But now, just we have two more slides before we round up today. Next slide is Ruchiji, is active reforms. Yes, and we should mention that Brahmo Samaj at that time, in its efforts to do social reform, did a lot of work. It set up schools in different areas, both for boys and for girls, secular education, modern, progressive education for all the children, even in the semi-urban areas. And then it managed to organize oppressed labor classes, especially tea workers in different areas, hilly areas of India. Then, of course, it made a great movement against child marriage, which Joyda was talking about. Underage marriage was banned according to this Brahmo Marriage Act. But of course, the contradictions came when Keshab Chandra Sen gave his daughter, who was about 14 years old, uh, she she had to marry the royal family of Kuch Bihar. So that created a lot of controversy, and all the very faithful followers of Keshab Chandra Sen started revolting against him. Anyway, that's another thing. So Brahmo Samaj also took a lot of steps for widow remarriage. So, and there is also this idea, which Joydeep is also mentioned a bit to some extent, that the concept of Brahmo Samaj somehow was restricted to Kolkata and the city areas. And also, there's other things that must be pointed out. If you go through the list of all the notable figures in the Brahmo Samaj, most of them were educated, middle class, upper middle class, and Brahmins. You see, you won't see usually people in the village or people among in the tribal areas trying to initiate reforms for the whole society as at large. You won't see. They might try to reform something that happens in the community. It is among the middle class, it is among the intellectuals, it is among the Brahmins who try this kind of social reforms for the whole society, big picture. So I think if Brahmo Samaj, the Andolan of the movement of the Brahmo Samaj was restricted to Kolkata, is not a bad thing at all. I mean, a lot of things was happening in Kolkata. Vivekananda was happening in Kolkata, Ramkrishna was happening in Kolkata, a lot of things was happening in Kolkata, and it is from this section of the society that really a revolution or a movement really starts and starts to spread. So I think that is not a big problem, and that is also the role of Brahmins to initiate change, to initiate revolutions, because they are thinkers. They are the ones who are scholars who can see the big picture. One is called a Brahmin because he sees the big picture. He sees the wider range, the greater spectrum, not only for his own community but for other communities as well. So I think that can be answered. And also, there is another, let's say, allegation that modern day leftist historians have against Brahmo Samaj. They say it's not really allegation, it's a kind of a comment, a sly statement. They say that the Brahmo Samaj was a middle class bourgeois Vedanta. So again, it is typical leftist kind of a language. We do not need to comment on such a foolish remark. And now we come to the last slide, which I think is a very important one to understand. The last slide is the splits and breakups. Ruchiji, I hope you are there. Please come to the last slide. Yes, thank you very much. And you see on the left, of my left, you see the picture of Keshab Chandra Sen, a very, very dynamic personality. He had a great charisma. He had a wonderful charisma. And in the middle, you see the picture of Swami Vivekananda. And on the right, you see Sri Ramkrishna. So, and this Brahmo Samaj, as Joydeep has also mentioned, to some extent, we'll also sort of take a trace that its evolution was laced with splits and breakups. And because there were many personalities, many personalities with many ideas, so in a way it is very good. I think it's a very nice sign that Brahmo Samaj was always teeming with different ideas, and that's why they had to split and break up from each other, because it was not at all a dogmatic organization that we have to follow this rule and forever. That kind of feeling was not there. So it was evolving. Unfortunate that it had to break up sometimes, but again, that shows the multi-layered ideas that were embraced in the Samaj. You can imagine the debates that they had, very high quality debates that they had between themselves. So it was Brahmo Samaj during Devendranath's time, and then split up. Devendranath, who was very fond of Keshab Chandra Sen, had named him Brahmananda, but later he was aghast because of Keshab Chandra Sen's radical ideas. And Keshab Sen was again very emotional person. He was a Vaishnava by nature. I mentioned this from a spiritual point of view. I had also mentioned Devendranath was a devotion, was a Bhakta, was a devotee by nature, and Keshab Chandra Sen was a Vaishnava by nature. Why is this important? Because Brahma Samaj was aiming towards always, at least on the book, a shapeless, formless, attributeless Brahma with a Vaishnava heart. That's a problem. And I'll come to that. So, so Keshab Chandra Sen had, and his friends and his followers had drifted away from the Devendranath Thakur. Then they formed the Bharat Varshya Brahmo Samaj, Keshab Chandra and his followers, and then Devendranath Thakur, his Brahmo Samaj became the Adi Brahmo Samaj. And later, after Keshav Sen's daughter's marriage, when his followers revolted, especially under Shivnath Shastri, then it became that Brahma Samaj became the Sadharan Brahma Samaj. So all these splits and breakups happened. So look at the towering personalities. I was talking about all these personalities, the Vivekananda, then Bijoykrishna Goswami, then Shivnath Shastri, Pratap Chandra Majumdar. We must remember that Pratap Chandra Majumdar was one of the representatives of Brahma Samaj in the Chicago World Parliament of Religions. Even as Joydeep was talking about Prarthana Sabha, even Prarthana Sabha was separately represented by a leader in that Chicago conference. So there was Rakhal. Rakhal was Swami Brahmananda, who became the first president of Ramakrishna Mission. Then Sharad Chandra Chakraborty, who was Swami Sharadananda of Ramakrishna Mission, and many others. Later Chittaranjan Das, who was a political mentor of Subhash Chandra Bose. So all these people were there, one time or the other. From the very beginning to the end, Brahmo Samaj had these great multifaceted personalities. And Brahmo Samaj was inspiring towards the later stages, as we saw from Rajnarayan Bosu's comments and speeches. It was inspiring a kind of a Hindu nationalism. And one important point is that the Muslims were moving away from it, from this movement, because you see, uh, after the Battle of Palashi, after Shiraj-ud-Dawla was defeated, the Muslims felt aggrieved against the British, no doubt. So they held on to their own culture, own traditions as much as they could. On the other hand, the Hindus came closer to the British in certain ways. They tried to become, close, and they tried to reap some benefits from this closeness. The Muslims tried to stay away and felt a kind of animosity both for the British and for the Hindus who were cozying up to the British. So some leaders tried to change this. For example, Keshab Chandra Sen, he instructed one of his followers, Girish Chandra Sen, to translate the Quran into Bengali. Again, a revolutionary move at that time, and must have been very controversial. But when Girish Chandra Sen did that, it helped a lot in creating among some of the Muslims, a kind of a Muslim Bengali identity. And this is what Keshab Chandra Sen wanted. You see, this is what he wanted in the Brahmo Samaj. So, was somehow, in spite of all these efforts, finally the Muslims stayed away when they saw that this was becoming a kind of a nationalist movement. So all the people who feel nowadays that the Brahmo Samaj or Ram Mohan Rai or Keshab Sen, they played no part. Yes, Keshab Chandra Sen at one time, even before the Indian National Congress was formed, he was wondering whether he should create a political party for eventually for the freedom of India. So he was, in his own way, always a visionary who was thinking far ahead of his time. You see? So I think this has to be remembered. That this is very important for us to ponder over when we say that these were just trying to make some kind of cosmetic reforms, and they had no role. All the people who were engaged with the Brahmo Samaj were somehow responsible for the cultural upliftment of Bengal, and that cultural upliftment, also the fact that these social reforms were taking place, also the fact that young boys, men and women were getting good education, progressive education, that part of that section was getting anglicized, the other part of the section was becoming more and more aware of its own roots, of its own culture and heritage, as we had mentioned before. So that way, directly and indirectly, the feeling of nationalism was very much a part of the Brahmo Samaj agenda. Nationalism that will at least have a voice. At that, in the middle of the 19th century, they were not really thinking about freedom. They were thinking about having a national voice pitted against the British voice of the rulers, the people who were oppressing us or dictating us or taking advantage of us. So that, I think, has to be remembered. And finally, as I said, when we talk about the impact, I would like to say, I'd like to add a few words about Sri Ramakrishna. But before that, many youngsters who were getting attracted to the Christian ideology, this idea of one God and the Son of God, pitted against the thousands of gods and goddesses who were being insulted day and night. But all these people, all these young people who were attracted towards Christianity were brought back to the Hindu fold because of the Brahma Samaj. That is also very important. And also we have to remember, while we conclude, that the 19th century, our religious movements, our society, our education, our women's emancipation, and all these things, and even the political movements that we were participating in, were directly or indirectly related to the Brahmo Samaj and its influence. This is very important for us to remember. Now we come to this problem of the later stages of the Brahmo Samaj. Now, should we say, this is now I am coming to what I feel. Should we say that the Brahmo Samaj broke up? Should we say that the Brahmo Samaj failed in its mission? I don't think so. The problem Joydeep, it is something that I believe in, and something that my guru has explained to me, that when there is a kind of spiritual tide, it is usually an organic one. Problem with the Brahma Samaj was, talking about strictly the spiritual aspect of it. The problem with the Brahma Samaj was, it was an inorganic movement. It was a kind of a scholarship trying to take good ideas from different sources, extracting good ideas from our Vedas and Upanishads, some good ideas from the Quran, some good ideas from Bible and from other sources, and trying to create a comfortable space for ourselves, so that, okay, now we have a dharma which is progressive, which will be suitable for us, and which will give us a national identity, so that we can look into the eyes of the Christian and push back. But what I mean by organic dharma, look at Gautam Buddha. He realized, he did a lot of sadhana. He reached his top supreme consciousness. He attained nirvana, and he was not trying to go for a social reform. He did not walk out of his house to do social reform, to do something for the society. He walked away from the house to understand the nature of pain, to understand whether there is any liberation from death, disease, and pain. It was a personal quest which gave him the answer. When he got the answer, then he also had the power. He also had the energy or the power to share it with the world. And then that became a global movement. You see, that is what I mean by organic. Think of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was not going out in the streets of Navadvip thinking about, okay, I will try to bring about brotherhood between Hindus and Muslims, between Brahmins and Shudras. He was not doing that. He was steeped into his bhakti. He was steeped into it. It was his basic direct realization of Radha Krishna concept within himself. And that created a revolution in the society without him trying to do that. This was no ism. Chaitanya was not trying to bring about an ism like socialism, like Marxism, like this ism and that ism. So that is what I mean, the difference between organic and inorganic. I'll give you more concrete examples. As I have already told you, the people in the Brahma Samaj, all the members were wonderful people. And that is why Ramakrishna loved them so much. Ramakrishna never criticized them. One day in the Sabha, while there was this song going on, the song was about the, let me touch your feet, don't take your feet away from me. You know this song, for example, চরণ ধরিতে দিও গো আমারে, or তব দয়া দিও হবে গো মোর জীবন ধুতে, নইলে কি আর পারবো তোমার চরণ ছুতে, your mercy will help to wash my life, otherwise how will I be able to touch your feet? Now this is Rabindranath's song, but there were other songs like this. So one day Ramakrishna in that sabha, he loved going to the sabha. He loved the atmosphere. He loved the people. In that sabha, he just stood up in the middle of the song and he said, where is the feet of Brahma? This is the contradiction that I'm talking about. This is the problem of inorganic religion. You see, that there is some kind of a cosmetic, it's a kind of a thing that you make with your intellect. It's kind of, I'm not criticizing Ram Mohan Rai. He's a great social reformer, but he's not a realized seer. That is the difference between Ram Mohan Rai and maybe Vivekananda. And that is exactly what Vivekananda said many years later. He never criticized Ram Mohan Rai. He never criticized Vidyasagar. But he said, reforms are good, okay, but more important is awareness. More important is that people have to get awake through education, true education, real education. Then that will itself solve all these problems that you talk about. You're thinking about the outside things only. You're not going into the depths of the problem. You're thinking about, people, why are children being married off to people? Okay, that can be stopped by a new law. Okay, but does that change the heart of the father and the mother? Does that change the heart of the little girl who would like to say, no, I want to grow up and establish myself first? Does it? So that is what is awakening. That is the problem. Second problem, you see, Ramakrishna sometimes said in his very childlike way to Keshab Sen and Bijoykrishna Goswami, he used to say that, why are you always saying in your speeches, in your sermons, that you have created the sky, you have created the flowers, you have created the sun, you are so beautiful, you are so true, you are so wonderful, you have created love. What about the other aspects of life? What about the pain? What about the suffering? What about the poverty? Isn't your Brahma in them too? These are very simple, childlike questions, and these great scholars did not have any answers. So this was the, contradiction in the spiritual content of what they were trying to do. Whenever he looked at Bijoykrishna Goswami in his coat and his hat and his tie, giving speech in the sermon, Ramakrishna used to smilingly say, this is not what I see. This is not your dress. I see you in long matted hair, wearing mala, dancing and doing Harinam, because that is you. So he was showing the inconsistency in the movement. People were actually, in this craze for the Brahma Samaj, suppressing their own nature, which is a Vaishnava nature of Bijoykrishna Goswami. So we are talking about this formless and this shapeless, attributeless Brahma, and that should be the key defining, the philosophy or religion of Hindu Dharma. But that is not Hindu Dharma. That's only one part of Hindu Dharma. And by the time of Ramakrishna, you had Ramakrishna now, who showed you the beauty of idol worship. And he was constantly saying, he was telling Vivekananda and everybody that if Brahma is truth, even Kali is truth. In the sense, it is the same Brahma manifested in time, manifested in space. It's the same Brahma, then unmanifested. So he was sort of wedging the gap. By that time, you also had Ramprasad Sen. By that time, you also had Bhamakapa and many other great so-called idol worshippers. So the problem was not with idol worshipping, The problem was that there were social evils because there was no moral guidance. This is the reason why Brahmo Samaj did not break. It sort of Ramkrishna absorbed them into himself. All these, most of these people, Pratap Chandra Mojumdar, Keshab Chandra Sen, Shivnath Shastri, Bijoykrishna Goswami became his followers, not his disciples. They didn't have to become his disciples. They became his followers. They learned to understand their own nature, their own volition, their own path with the guidance of Ramakrishna. And then Vivekananda, when he went to the West and came back to India, he gave a more, you see, overarching concept of the Hindu religion, which was also inspired by his days in the Brahmo Samaj, also inspired by his association with Ramakrishna, also inspired by what he had learned about the Vedas and Upanishads and many traditions of India, about Buddhism being another just a reform movement, not a separate religion, and all these things. He managed to absorb the whole thing. You see, that's my reading. So I don't think Brahmo Samaj is a failure at all. I think it's just it sort of that period was required. Those 60 years from 1828 to around 1884, though that period was required very much. And then it had to also go into the sea of the mainstream Hindu ideology in the form of Ramakrishna. Because by that time, the society was beginning to see their reality that we are a diverse society, we are a diverse cultural, and we are not like the other Semitic cultures. We do not speak in one voice. Maybe you are a yogi, I'm a bhakta, somebody else is a gyani, somebody else worships Kali, somebody else worships the Durga, somebody worships Shiva. Okay, no problem. We are all going to the same Brahma. Another problem is that Ram Mohan identified our culture as polytheistic. It is not. It is not polytheistic. It is pantheistic. You see, polytheistic means we do not think that there are many Ishwars. Problem is this word God is the problem. There is no such word as God in India. Ishwar is completely different from the Semitic God. For them, one God. And for us also, there is only one Ishwar. Yes, I may have I worship Indra, I worship Vishnu, I worship the tree in my village, but I believe that there is one Ishwar who projects himself in all these manifestations. So this is pantheistic. I see Ishwar in everything. That is the Indian culture. So, I don't think Ram Mohan was wrong. He saw that there were many social evils. And he thought the way to cure these evils was to attack the ideal worship traditions of India or Bengal. That was the main problem. And that got solved by the end of the 1880s and the 90s, you see. Anyway, I think I've taken a lot of time. I go back to you.
That's an interesting talk, Maharaji. But there are quite a lot of comments in our chat box from Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So now I would like to invite Neena ji. Neena ji, can you please unmute yourself and switch on your camera? So there are quite a lot of comments there, quite a lot of questions which we would like to ask you. So,
There's
Neena
a
ji, over to you now.
heated discussion going on in the comments section. But first, I would like to ask you, sir, that you said that it was a part of Hinduism. Then why it was apologetic of Hindu customs and Hindu rituals? Why they had to form another way of getting married and renounce all the Hindu wedding rituals or all the other kind of rituals? Could you please answer that?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Neena ji. And also, I think we have addressed this question. I think the one of the main reasons why they tried to go away from or they always insisted, at least Rajnarayan Boshu did insist, and some other leaders insist, that Brahmo Dharma is nothing but a refined Hindu Dharma. You see? So, what they were trying to do is they were trying to make some changes in the language structure. At the time of marriage, we always use Sanskrit mantras, and most of the people don't understand that mantra. So they were trying to introduce these Bengali mantras in Bengali language during the time of marriage, which will not be accepted by the mainstream Hindu Brahmins and Pandits, obviously. but it will be understood by the people who are getting married. They will know exactly what these sentences mean. And also, they tried to introduce at that time the Brahmo Marriage Act was mainly intended to stop this underage marriage. You see, to restrict the age or to fix a minimum age at 14. That was the idea. They at that time, I think, except for a few, they did not have any intention of separating themselves from Hindu Dharma, though there were many people who doubted their intentions. So that is, I think, the main problem is, as I was saying, they were trying to change some social problems. They are trying to reform some social problems and trying to use religion to do that. Yes.
So, does it accept Vedas as the sole text?
Yes, at that time, the Brahmo Samaj at that time, and because, as I have said, that the if you trace the growth and the development of the Samaj, it had undergone a lot of change, a lot of evolution. Keshab Chandra Sen, in fact, he had become an idol worshipper himself at one time. One of the great leaders of the Brahmo Samaj. He became so popular, and his speeches were so fascinating, and he was such a marvelous person to be with, that he became a guru. He started giving diksha. People were washing his feet, with the idea that their sins will be cleaned if they did so. They also started doing, imagine, Brahmo Samaj also started doing Sankirtan on the streets of Kolkata, which only Vaishnavas do. So you see, initially that was what Raja Ram Mohan Rai's ideas, that Veda and the Upanishads will be considered the authentic scriptures. Others will be discarded. That was the idea, but that changed a lot. Devendranath Thakur himself was at heart a Hindu, and later, Keshab Chandra Sen, though he tried to separate himself, though he tried to create a separate Brahmo Dharma, but he was essentially a Vaishnava, a Hindu, who became a close follower of Ramakrishna during his later days. And it was quite obvious that he was not advocating that Veda and Upanishad should be the only scriptures, that all other scriptures, especially bhakti-related scriptures, the devotional scriptures, were allowed.
You said it was a refined form of Hinduism, uh, right? So, today, when so much education has come from the time of independence, now the India is quite. So, how many people follow Brahmo Samaj? And did it seep into rural Bengal? Did it go anywhere beyond Bengal?
I think, Ninaji, all the people who are asking these questions have not really listened to discussion at all.
Hello. Let me answer
Uh,
this lady. You're asking questions which have been covered by Maharaj.
Yes.
You're again asking them. I think it will not be a very productive exercise. You
okay,
have
then
not
let me
listened.
go to
You
the.
have not
Let me.
listened. You have not listened to him. He made it very clear in his very top of the this thing exposition. Maybe you were not hearing him. I think we will have to rule out questions like this. Sorry.
Sir, I have listened to everything, but there's a comments thing going on. And the thing is that there is a heated discussion going on about sati, which I'm not entertaining actually, because they are saying there's somebody is quoting numbers from Christian missionaries, and we would like to have
Sati
numbers.
now, as of
No,
today.
no,
Let,
when it was banned,
no, but
how
madam, this
prevalent
has been
was it?
covered. This has been covered by Maharaj. Why are we going back to this?
And
The
Sati has
whole
nothing to,
debate
and
about
Sati,
sati has
Sati per
been
se has
covered
nothing
by
to do with Brahmo
Maharaj
Samaj.
very clearly. So please do not reopen this. I
But
think this will go on the whole night.
yeah, okay. So like, I don't have any more questions. Thanks.
Now,
Please.
Ninaji, remember that Sati was never a Brahmo Samaj agenda. Sati was the Ram Mohan Rai's personal movement. You see, when Brahmo Samaj was formed, the Sati movement the abolition had happened before that. That was before. You see,
He
so that had
watched
nothing
his
to do.
sister-in-law. No, no. He watched
Yes,
this lady deserves an answer. He
yes.
had the tragedy, trauma. of watching his sister-in-law, and at that time Ramon was very young. So I think what the Maharaj wanted to tell you very briefly, that trauma affected Ramon, and over the years, so I think we can go on to a few things more, and otherwise, where is our lady from Ahmedabad? No. There it is.
So would just
No,
like to
I
ask,
think
is there anything more to discuss,
will
or
go
can
on
we
forever.
conclude today's session here?
Yeah, I think we are the Maharaj who deserves a break.
Yes, I think Joyda can conclude, and I think I'm done
I
for
think
today.
no. I think the two ladies and I and all the other viewers, we have gone through an experience which is rare. Certainly for me, I have many more years of advantage over you. I don't know, Joydeep, whether we'll meet again, but we've had an experience today of a level of discourse, which is extremely rare. You know, I don't need to butter you up. So we have been blessed with an enormously interesting evening, and I think we should thank Maharaj. And if there are any other questions from the audience, we could take 2 or 3 more, but we'll have to wind it up. What do you say, ma'am?
Yeah, I think we should conclude this session now.
Yes.
So, yeah, thanks for joining
Please
us.
please thank Maharaj.
Yeah, Maharaji and Joyji, both of you. Thanks for joining Sangam Talks and Bangla Bar for this session.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Jai Hind.